Right. Then, Shrama eva hi kevalam, as Prabhupada would like to say, then your life is a useless waste of time. Then all you're doing is accumulating karma and suffering or enjoying the reactions of karma. You're on the Ferris wheel. By accumulated sukriti pious merit, you're going to a higher position, heavenly planets, exhausting all your enjoyment credits, gradually descending into lower species, going up again, over and over again. Brahma bhuvana loka punar arvatunojana mamupecha punar janma. I get the last line. Punar janma navidyate? No. Anyway, it's mentioned in the Gita by Krishna to Arjuna. He's saying, even Brahma on Brahmaloka, it says in the Bhagavatam, avirinchada mangalam. Virinchi means Brahma, a Mangal. There's a certain amount of inauspiciousness in his position. It's given as an example of Karma Misra Bhakti in the Brihad Bhagavatamritam sequence. So sometimes it's even said the first birth is as Brahma, then descending from there. So how is that possible? How is it possible for Indra, the king of heaven, to become a pig? Right? When in New Age ramblings, they always like to talk about, especially the women, they said I was a princess or a queen in my last life. So everyone can read that sounds really romantic. You were once a queen or a king or a princess. But they never tell you, you were once in the body of a stool-eating pig, because that won't sell the same amount of books or tarot cards, right? But Indra, how embarrassing for the king of heaven to be, devolve into the body of a pig, and with all the trappings, surroundings of pig life, with a pig wife, little piglets, and Brahma and the other gods, they're very embarrassed to see one of their own, executive officer Jiva, to descend to such a abominable position. So they're trying to, who is maybe Narad, I forget whom, trying to bring him to his senses. And he's guarding his pig wife and piglets and his pigsty. I mean, he worked for this. He built that sty. And so one by one, they start throwing the piglets into the pond and drowning them. And he and his wife are thinking, what kind of a cruel man is this? And each piglet that dies, they resume their position as a devata in heaven. And they're all watching this on a big screen in heaven, the equivalent of a big screen. And Indra, finally it's just him and his wife. Then they kill his wife. Then finally his pig body is given up. And then he resumes his position in heaven, Indra. And he can see the replay on the big screen of what happened. And they're saying to him, would you like to go back to that? No! Now he's come to his senses. His higher self is kicked in. And he can understand how he degraded. It's with experience, by practical experience, we know that it's difficult to improve, to upgrade, but you can become degraded in 15 minutes. It's amazing how quickly degradation sets in. As one of the great writers, perhaps Hemingway, in a description said of someone, at first things started to fall apart gradually, then all at once. So satsanga tyagi Vaishnavachar. One of the first symptoms of the serious pursuit of Vaishnavism in earnest is a satsanga tyag, to give up bad association, mundane association, or those who are addicted, associating with those who are addicted to the mundane. Still, Bhaktivinoda Thakur says in one of his songs that the association of a sense enjoyer, a Bishai, is preferable to a Mayavadi or a Sahajiya. Why? Because, as you mentioned, some man in the world in that position, he still has the chance to get the good fortune of connection with an agent of the Nirguna plane. Brahmanda Brahmite Kona Bhagavan Jeev, wandering the length and breadth of the world of misconception. He may come in connection with an agent of proper conception and come under his influence, seek shelter, association, service. Whereas the Mayavadis, Guru Maharaj says, they've put themselves in a concentration camp. He says that, or in a tomb where they have no access to Vaishnavas and Nirguna agents. And Sahaja downfall is imitation. As the American transcendentalist Emerson said, imitation is suicide. Why? Because you're actually denying yourself, your actual self-potential, your actual identity, who you are, by imitating another. It's artificial. Those who follow the Stanislavski method of acting, their wives, friends, relatives sometimes say, once they get into character, some of them stay in a character 24 hours, 24/7 for the duration of the shoot of a movie. Their wives, friends, relatives will say, he's very good at getting into character, but very bad at getting out. So imitation is not only suicidal, but we can say, in the example of currency, like they're issuing a new $100 bill, Ben Franklin, on the US currency. In a few months, they're going to flood the world with these new $100 bills. So it'll be yet again a time for counterfeiters to get to work. And here's the problem. Not only, first of all, only people who are being duped accept a counterfeit bill in currency exchange. So, number one, it looks like the real thing, but it's not. And what does that mean in this case? That means it's not only valueless, of no value, but it's punishable, it's criminal to possess such currency. Such is the position of Prakrita Sahajiyas, who are imitating spiritual currency and trying to circulate that, particularly those who do so invoking the name of Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, who is every Sahajiya's worst enemy. So, still, wandering the length and breadth of the universe, evolving from lower life forms to higher life forms, the gradual development, the subjective evolution of consciousness. Such a person comes to the human form of life. What do the Upanishads say? Yo vai tad aksharam gargavidmasmal kripana. the Upanishads make a comparative distinction between Brahmins, and the opposite of a Brahmin is what is called a Kripana, which means miser. Like we say, Kripa means mercy, Kripa, na, merciless, miser. So what is the example given? That as a miser accumulates immense wealth, but what is their fault? They don't spend it. They hoard the money. So we're told, a soul who evolves to the position of a human being, labdva sudurlabam bahuva sambhavante, bahu sambhavante. It's a rare opportunity, even biologically speaking, to take human birth. So you have this great wealth of opportunity afforded by human life, right? A tato brahma jigyasa, for spiritual inquiry, but you don't spend it on that. Such a person is a kripana, a miser. Whereas a Brahman is someone who's by their very nature inclined towards inner culture, spiritual development. What others have a hard time getting their head around, Brahmins understand intuitively. They more easily can recognize the underlayer, beneath superficial life and circumstances, the spiritual undercurrent. Namo Brahmana Devaya Go Brahmana Hitaya Cha, Jagaditaya Krishnaya Govindaya Namo Namaha. As Krishna, we're told, is affectionate for the cows, he also likes Brahmins because of their natural spiritual inclinations. But again, we say, oh yeah, but they're like that and we're not. Yeah, but that's a soul who's evolved to that position. Our position is non-Brahminical. Kalo Shudra Sambhava. Even the Brahmins in Kali Yuga are spiritually deficient. Right? So, and it says, Janmana Jayate Shudra. By birth, everyone starts off in a lower position and can acquire through superior association and service some gradual unfolding and development of virtuous qualities. So sadhu sangha sarva shastra koi, labhamatra sadhu sangha sarva siddhi hoy. It's imperative to use the human life and spiritual culture, and that by getting sadhu sangha, spiritual association. Even, I've made this point when I would travel around Russia, that like in Tomsk, there's the cultural center. Actually, in every Russian town or city, and other places in the world, what's in the heart, usually in the primo location of every city, is a cultural center. Because people understand here are supposed to be on display the greatest achievements of human civilization, of human thought. As the Victorians or I believe, or Romantic, they expressed. They said, "What is poetry?" And by extension, that means deep thought. They said, "The best of what has been thought and expressed." That's what literature should be. That's what culture should be about. The best of what has been thought and expressed. So they understand that you go to the cultural center and you see the play, the ballet, hear the orchestra. Why? Because there's an intuitive understanding. This is the zenith point of human civilization. That's the way it was. Now we have the internet. Right? Well, again, maybe Thoreau, another American transcendentalist, when they told him, what do you think about the transatlantic cable? That was a cable that went from New York under the ocean to London so they could send messages instantly. It was like before the internet. That was the 19th century conception of wired. And when asked what he thought about it, everyone was so excited. He said, what if the news is that the princess has a cold? And that's what the news has become. This movie started this person did that. In the golden age of television, they said that television would eradicate ignorance. After TV, there would no longer be illiterate people. Everybody, through the medium of television, would become enlightened. All knowledge would be available to them through TV. In the end, not even, midway as the first television generation. As now there's the internet generation, as the first television generation. By the mid-60s, one of the slang names for TV was boob tube. Boob has different meanings, we know. So it became boob tube in other ways in time too. But what they meant at the time by calling it boob also means idiot. So it was told, you sit in front of this, you don't become an enlightened thinker, you become a moron. A passive, overweight moron. Right? That was the end result of this enlightenment device called television. So there's always one or another, plus ça change, plus c'est la même chose. The French say the more things change, the more they remain the same. So the other day someone showed a bunch of quotes about, it appeared to be anti-internet, like anti-Twitter, Facebook, every quote, you thought, oh, that's what they're talking about. And actually it's saying like, now people will stop communicating personally with one another. And there's a whole list of quotes like this. But then at the end it says, these were comments people made in the 19th century about magazines. They were saying, now that there are magazines, how it was going to ruin human interpersonal relationships. So here we are, 13 years into the 21st century. Social networking, Twitter, Instagram. In the future, people go, what was that? And someone will go, look it up in Wikipedia. What's that? It will all change, plus ça change, plus c'est la même chose, and become more of the same. And still the world, this I guarantee to all the future viewers, tell me if there's still janma mrityu jara vyadi, birth, death, old age, and disease. Do a little check list on that one for me. I'm willing to bet that they're still there. They're inescapable. Mortality is inescapable. Science hasn't made people immortal. Right? We're searching after amrita, which means nectar, and by extension immortality. It's the search of the devas and the asuras, as we're told in the churning of the Kir ocean. And I like to frame this in a modern sense, that in one sense, the ultimate pursuit of theist and atheist is similar. Everybody wants happiness. No one can deny that they want to be happy. They want love, affection, a loving, affectionate, happy relationship. Atheist, theist, agnostic, alike. It's how to pursue these things through freedom for the senses, the total, unadulterated, unconstrained expression of the senses, or, as Guru Maharaj told, freedom from the senses, where one is no longer a slave to the tongue, belly, genital, etc. What is real freedom? What is liberation? What is that Brahma Jigyasa, the spiritual inquiry beyond the base necessities of existence. That's actually the hallmark of spiritual culture. So Vedanta says, Atato Brahma Jigyasa, Atato, now that you've achieved human life, inquire about Brahma. That's where it begins. That's why it starts with the word now. Some commentators explain it means, yes, now that you've achieved human life, this is what it's meant for. What did Socrates say, who we mentioned earlier? The unexamined life is not a life worth living. That's Socrates' opinion, expressed so long ago, 1,000 years ago. An unexamined life is not a life worth living. Meaning, Atma Samiksha, self-analysis, to try and understand who I am, where have I come from, what is my purpose. So you say, well, what if someone's not interested in who they are, where they've come from, what their purpose is, but they're just basically interested in reproduction and family maintenance? Okay. You mean like an animal who has no capacity for self-inquiry, can reproduce and maintain their family? So Prabhupada said in one place about human beings in Kali Yuga, man is a royal edition of the animal. And where's one famous artist in the 20th century used to make, you've probably seen these pictures somewhere on the net where like dogs playing poker. They're all dogs in suits, smoking cigars, playing cards. I'm not the first person to make these observations, and it's not just, oh, a bunch of fanatical people of this opinion. Read Steppenwolf by Hermann Hesse. The Steppenwolf, Harry Haller, goes to attend a lecture, and everyone's there and they're very impressed with the man. I forget if he even mentions what the subject is. And the host who's writing about the Steppenwolf, he says, the lecturer said, maybe he's talking about the universe, whatever it was, it doesn't even matter. It was the 19th century, whatever the latest theory was. And he said, the Steppenwolf shot me a look, like looked at me. And he said, and in that look, he, I'm paraphrasing now, annihilated all of modern civilization. And it said to me, look at what monkeys we've become. Right? Written by Hermann Hesse 100 years ago. Solzhenitsyn. Serene, voluntary self-restraint. He said, you have the freedom. When he came to America and they invited him to give the Harvard address to the students, and they thought, oh, now Alexander, Sasha, will tell everyone how wonderful the United States is. And he said, well, I could never recommend what's going on in the Soviet Union. What you've got going on here is less than something for the dignity of man. And he said, you have the right to express anything and everything, but you've given up the right not to have your mind and soul stuffed with nonsense, with gossip, with mundane, useless trivia and information. That you've given up. And in the name of freely expressing anything and everything. Right? So many have made scathed, they called his address, A World Split Apart, a scathing indictment of Western civilization. What did Gandhi say when they said, Mahatmaji, what do you think about Western civilization? He said, I think it would be a good idea. How does Dostoevsky begin Notes from the Underground? I am an ugly man. I am an unhappy man. I am a sick man. That's the state of affairs. Why is he appreciated? For his honesty. What does he say? I would wonder how it is I could, in one moment, be raising a glass, a toast, to the truth, the highest, the best, the spiritual. And in the next moment, capable of sinking into the lowest slime. He's an honest man, telling the situation, not trying to hide. Have to call a spade a spade. And I know you're going, what does that mean? Means being naked truth, be honest. We're told, don't speak a truth that's unpalatable. I have a problem with that from time to time. But sometimes they say sadhu means one who cuts sharply with unpleasant language. The doctor who removes the cancer does it with a scalpel. Is he cruel? Or is he your real friend? He's removing the cancer. And this is how you do it. If somebody can do it in a sweet way with the least amount of pain, all the better. Like when I went to the hospital, Vaishnava Maharaj took me there, Sruta Shravarpu, and they shot me full of these drugs that make you feel very happy. I'm very happy to be, And I'm joking with the doctors while they're seeing if the anesthesia is taking effect. And it's in Marin County and they have this beautiful poster of like the outdoors waterfalls on the ceiling. And I made some jokes about it. And then I told the nurse, I don't think the anesthetic is working. It smelled like this sweet flower, I said, I don't think it's working. She went, okay, give it a, And then I made some jokes about the poster. And then I looked and saw, then the poster was gone. And I said, look, I was only kidding, because I thought they took the poster down because of what I said. I said, you can leave it there, I was only kidding. And then a nurse comes up to me and she goes, I want you to take this pill. It was 4 hours later. What happened during those 4 hours? She goes, she comes from, I want you to take this pill and this cracker. And by then, I was like really high on a lot of choice, class A drugs available at your local hospital. So I said to her, she started eating a cracker too. I said, you can have a cracker, but you can't have a Vicodin. And she said, okay. And then Vaishnava Maharaj, Sruta Shravarpu came there, and there's a monitor like that, but it's turned so it's got all these, beep, boop, beep, and all these numbers on it. And I said, can I watch it? And she came over and turned it around. I said, sure. She said, you let me know if something goes wrong. So we have met the enemy, and the enemy is us. Arrogance, lack of humility, unwillingness to recognize your limitations, shortcomings, lack of qualification. Doinya atmani vedan gopritve baran. So sometimes Bhaktivinoda lists first, doinya, that you have to honestly admit the hopelessness and helplessness of your situation, of life, of human life. Not only can you not help others, you cannot help yourself. As Joni Mitchell once said on a 60s retrospective, she said, by the end of the 60s, we realized we couldn't save the world. She's talking about idealists. She said, by the end of the 70s, we realized we couldn't save ourselves. So in the 80s, she said sarcastically, facetiously, we just decided to make money. Oscar Wilde said, when I was younger, I used to think money was everything. Now that I'm older, I know it's everything. So this type of cynicism, there's a fine line between a healthy skepticism about materialism and just being out and out cynical. Doinya, Bhaktivinoda is telling you not becoming cynical, mean, nasty, always finding fault with everyone and everything. That's not what he's talking about. He's talking about self-analysis. As Gurudev said, my religion is finding fault with myself, looking in yourself, and it's not a cop-out or a sign of a weak mind, a weak-willed individual, to do an honest assessment of yourself and say, yes, I'm, in a sense, hopeless, helpless. Right? Humanism tries to awaken competitive ego assertion, and where you can envision yourself as an absolute center and try and extend the circumference or the range of your exploitating capacity, like Ozymandias or Ayn Rand. Selfishness, you don't owe anything to anyone, you know, you're number one, you're the man, the whole thing. Right? Why? Because I'm worth it. All of that, humanistic sloganeering. Right? Whereas Guru Maharaj will say, without the grace of Sri Guru, we are lifeless clay. Yogyata vichari kichu nahi pai. Yogyata means qualification. Yogyata vichare. If you consider, if you analyze, what are my qualifications? Kichu nahi pai. Nothing. Not even a little bit. See, that person will say, oh, don't beat yourself up. You got to believe in you. Learning to love yourself is the greatest love of all. Right? Poor Whitney. Right? Another humanistic, slow, empty, vapid humanistic slogan. No, the person who realizes does an honest assessment, just like an athlete would, of where your weak points are, where you need improvement, they get better. What does an athlete who wants to improve do? Play with people who are better than them, not who they can defeat. They want to play someone they can't defeat. That makes you better. Ajita means undefeatable, inconquerable. So the person who makes a realistic assessment of themselves, say like iron, they can be interested in the philosopher's stone, the chintamani, the sparshamani that converts iron into gold. Silver may not feel the necessity for gold so much. I'm silver. I'm okay. Happy being silver. But who has a more real, not an unrealistic, they have low self-esteem, they're just beating themselves up. That's not what we're talking about. A realistic assessment. Really? The boast of heraldry, the pomp of power, all that beauty, all that wealth e'er gave, awaits alike the inevitable hour. The paths of glory leads but to the grave. Gray's Elegy. After he wrote that, he's a minor poet, but then he was really an unknown. But after he wrote this poem, they published it in some newspapers. He remarked, he said, I woke up one morning and I was famous. What did he say? However high you go, Brahma Bhuvanal Loka Punar Avartan Ojana. Mam Upetu Punar Janma. I have to look at that again. But it all ends up in the same place, the grave. It's all finished at that time. That's not a morbid thought. It's called Memento Mori. Things that remind us, death reminders are enlightening. Because that's the situation that we're in. Every day, the news, death is front page news. The famous die, the wealthy die, the rich die, the beautiful die, the young die. Dealing with the mortality issue is not cowardly. Requires some courage. When someone gets cancer in America, especially a famous person, some representative, a friend, someone will come out and go, Bill's a real fighter, he's going to fight this thing. Okay. You know, there's a place in Ireland where they'll accept a bet on just about anything. I'm betting on cancer. Anyone wants to take me? I'll always bet on cancer. No, he's going to fight this thing. And he's going to lose. So the great atheist, Christopher Hitchens, he died last year. And when even he mocked this stuff, he said, it's as if to say, if they write in the obituary, after a long struggle with mortality, he succumbed. Death is an inevitability for everyone. So, before another death occurs, that's what it says. Tasyeva hetu prayate tu kovido nalabyate brahmatam ubaryada. Many places, the Bhagavatam's imploring us, while you have this opportunity before you, dharmashta swanustita pungsam vishvakseno katasya, not pariyed yadiritam srama eva kevalam. Even to devotees, saying, if the end result of whatever it is you're doing is not increased attraction for hearing and chanting about Krishna, you're wasting your time. Another place, kamasya nendriya priti labhu jiveta yavata jivasya tattva jigyasa narto yascheha karmabhi. A formula is given how to balance the mundane and the spiritual. And what is being said? You only need to accumulate the mundane to the point where it allows you to engage maximum energy in spiritual culture. That's the right balance, that's the right formula. Otherwise, it's just to be ignorant. I've seen goats in Calcutta, they're on their way to the slaughterhouse. And how you know, they put red paint on them, on the neck. the ones that are indicating, and the guy's herding them over, and then they get in a line. And you'll see, while they're waiting to get their heads chopped off, a male goat mounting a she-goat and having sex with a she-goat is going to have his head cut off in 3 minutes. Hello? Hello? The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. Have to be forward. Look. Mrityu sarva haraschaham. Krishna says, if you don't get it any other way, Mrityu sarva haraschaham. I come before you as death and take away everything. When my brother, who was a theist when he was younger, wanted to be a priest, then got educated by Enlightenment teachers and became an atheist, and then a doctor and everything. I could say this if he was in the room. Anyway, he's a surgeon, a big-time urologist. But when he was 37, he went in to operate one day, and he keeled over onto the operating table, and they had to operate on him. He had an attack of gastroenteritis or something. And so it looked like he was going to die. The doctors weren't telling us. They thought, prepare yourselves that he's going to die. And our family's noted for the sense of humor. So anyway, so I went to see him, and I opened the door, and I said, I heard you called for a priest. But he wasn't laughing at the time. And he turned to me and he went, it's God! It's God! Not that I was God, but what he meant was, what happened to me? It's God. And he said, for those who don't get it any other way, he got it momentarily. But then he recovered gradually, and then resumed his position as an atheist. A so-called atheist. I think he's a closet theist, a Krishnite at heart. And he's counting on me. He's betting on me. He does pay attention. So, directly or indirectly, everybody's searching for Krishna, dealing with Krishna. For at last, there is only Krishna. There's nothing other than Krishna. Whatever appears to be other than Krishna is either a illusion, a Mayic illusion, or a Yoga-Mayic type. In other words, Baladev is the first other than Krishna. That's not what we're talking about here. Shiva is other than Krishna in that sense. That's why Baladev can be opposed to Krishna sometimes. Shiva can lead the opposition to Krishna. That's another subject matter. We're not invoking that at this time. And I say, but they're also not truly. It's what we call Achintya Beda Abed, like Amnaya Tattva. Similar and different. Same, but different. Back in Thailand. So, Advaya Gyan, there's only one thing to be known, and that is Krishna, either directly or indirectly. So, inevitably, everyone will come around. But when you're in the jurisdiction of time, space, measurement, anadi bahirmukh, it's like forever. So it only starts to bother somebody when they're materially exhausted, and through divine agency, some jata shradamatkatasu, some awakening of their innate potential. And then they start feeling some separation from Krishna. Jivas are atomic chit, so inherently they have everything that Chit Shakti proper has, Hladini Shakti, but it's atomic. So on account of their atomic magnitude, it can be overwhelmed by Maya. But in Ashraya Vigraha, shelter and association, a proper agent, Jiva's innate potential to love Krishna is awakened, fully developed and manifested. Jive Swarapai Krishna Nityadas. We're eternal servants of Krishna. That's our actual eternal position. It's only in what? Asmriti, forgetfulness of that we've misdirected that potential. It's pervertedly manifested as a lust for matter in the perverted reflection of the spiritual world. The good news is we are eternal servitors of Krishna. Not you become one. No. That is the eternal position of Jiva as described by Mahaprabhu. Only we are forgetful of our actual position. So we should be hopeful that by the grace of Guru and Vaishnava, bhaktya sanjatya bhaktya, that this can be awakened, nourished, developed, sadhu sangha satovare, by associating and serving the superior Vaishnavas. And that is special target of human life, human culture. But we see the Vaishnavas are so magnanimous, their association is beneficial for even non-human beings. The dogs, the birds, the trees, the insects, flowers being offered to the lotus feet of Giriraj Govardhan, Gauranga Mahaprabhu, Radha Govinda. Prabhupada once said, you know, in India especially, sometimes flowers have ants in them. You have to shake them out. So sometimes they don't get them all out. And then they offer a flower to the lotus feet of the deity, to Krishna. And Prabhupada said, then a little ant crawls out of the flower, he said, and kisses the lotus feet of Krishna. Then he's better than the pujari. Yat kinchit tri guma ki kata mukam goshte samastamitat sarvananda mukunda dvaitam lilanukulam param. Das Goswami praising even the insects in Vrindavan, saying they're mukunda dayata, they're dear to Mukunda. Why? Lilanukul, they're favorable to the pastimes. The bees humming in the lotus flowers, garlands. And what is their hum? They're singing praise of Krishna. Bhagavatam, where 4th canto, when the king of the bumblebees starts singing the glories of Krishna and dancing, everyone, Krishna, Balaram, everyone is astonished to hear his singing and observe his ecstatic dance and hear his enlightened song. Kataganam nattigamanam. They're everything. All speech is sung, all movement is dance, not only for the human beings, for the animals, for the insects. They're singing and dancing. The waves of Jamuna, ecstatic. We're offering lotus flowers to Krishna. A world beyond what we've conceived. Achintya. Therefore, that one poet who is it? Rutki. We need more people to specialize in the impossible. I'm in total agreement. Hare Krishna. Any other question? Yes. Parama Bhakti Dasi from Holland. Yes, what's the question? Jigyasa Sreya Uttamam.
The soul approaches matter, the material world, but before that he must pass through a shadowy stage of consciousness called Chidaphasa. Consciousness passes through the shadow level of consciousness into matter, non-consciousness, and that shadow stage of consciousness has its personality. It is also conscious and may be known as Ra. Could you please explain why it is mentioned here into matter, not non-consciousness? In specific, why the word non-consciousness is being used in this part?
Yes. I mean, actually, this is a whole other talk, and we're at the end of this one. But, in brief, to say, what do you call the Chit Jagat, the Achit Jagat. Chit means the spiritually conscious world. Achit means the unconscious world. Now, as a footnote, remember, everything is ultimately conscious substance. But, as Guru Maharaj says, a part of the perfect appears to be imperfect. So even this world, the jivas are sarvagata. They're everywhere. Meaning, if you really get into it, if you analyze this to the matter, to the nth degree, you'll see it's a suspended animation of jivas and conscious substance. So we refer to it as achit, the non-conscious, unconscious world, the material world, matter. Because as we told, what is matter? But like an iceberg floating in an ocean of consciousness. As Guru Maharaj says, the whole thing is hypnotism. Right? So a cluster of subjective concepts makes an object. So, since it's all consciousness, what Guru Maharaj is talking about here, saying just like we see in this world too, you can see, the shadow of something is based upon the real thing. Right? So he's saying for the chit, conscious subject to experience the mundane, it can't do it directly. So what does it have to do? You have to have a shadow representation of the soul or the conscious self. And that shadow can operate in the shadowy world. Otherwise, consciousness cannot negotiate the unconscious plane. So Guru Maharaj introduced the conception of Chayabhas, Chidabhas, a shadow self. A shadow of mind is this mind. A shadow of the intelligence. It's a shadow self operating in the shadow world. And we're making so many observations about shadow-like existence. That's what it is. I mean, this is an involved subject. We're at the last few minutes of this talk. But that's what he means. Chit Jagat, the conscious world, Achit Jagat, the unconscious world. So how can units of consciousness navigate the unconsciousness or perceive and deal with the unconscious? So introduce the conception, Chidabhas, a semblance, Chayabhas, a shadow self can operate, can deal with that. That's what he means. But ultimately, all of this, and he said, the world is in the mind. Bishop Barclay And the parody, oh, you mean none of this exists, we just think it does. That's not what he's saying. He's saying all of this that we perceive is floating in consciousness. That's what he means to say. The world is in the mind and not the mind is in the world. So, these are the deeply philosophical questions. And important, nonetheless. But we're told in the Bhagavatam, the example, and we can see now in the rainy season, the cloud is covering the moon, but the moon is illuminating the cloud. So all you see is the cloud, but without the illumination of the moon, you'd see nothing. So don't think the cloud, the illumined cloud, is the real thing. It's the moon that's covered by the cloud. So what it means to say is, the soul is covered by the body, mind, senses, ego, and is illuminating them. So what we see, the radiance of a person, the look in their eyes, the signals, signs that tell us of a presence of a person, really the soul's in the background, and that's our interest. Hare Krishna.